when I was out of the country. And he graciously invited me to speak here today. So I held on to it again, and I believe that the verse that we have read to a very large extent explains it. Usually, every time I've been here, there's been a gentleman who would usually sit there. Daddy will remember him. He was my friend, Ademola Adeshino Ogunlano. It pleases God to call him home 10 days after his 60th birthday, but his death brought home the urgency of now. You know, we always have this assumption that we have forever and that we are going to be living for a long time. And in our assumption of immortality, we really remember the biblical verse that tells us to number our days. Numbering your days is a way of reminding you of the fact that you are mortal and you will at some point, hopefully in the fullness of time, in your dotage, go on to glory. But nobody guarantees the length of days. So there is always an urgency to now. And that urgency is what has forced me to take another look at where we are, because almost on a daily basis, Facebook will bring one memory of Ogunlano or the other to me, because we shared a lot in common. And I saw all the things that he applied himself to, the selfless life that he lived. But I also could not help but remember the fact that he had plans running into years from now. He was a perfectly healthy man. He never slept a day in the hospital, but he's gone. He's gone. I woke up yesterday to find news of another person gone. We were in university together. He also had plans. So it became clear to me that this illusion that forces us to keep postponing needs to be challenged. But our own situation as a people, more urgent attention, not reactions. Reactions come about when things happen and you quickly run away. Maybe somebody shoots a banger in here now, so we all react. You don't plan for reactions. You simply do what comes natural to you in that moment. But responses, on the other hand, are slightly different. Responses means that you have enough time to plan what you should do. At least you have sufficient time to act without panic and in a reasonable or reasoned manner, regardless of the situation that you are confronted with. I'll bring all of this to our scripture, because how does this concern us as a people? The totality of my life's focus is about securing a future for the Nigerian child. My home is completely selfish. I don't know you, but I know the children that I have at home. I know all the other children that are connected to me in one way or the other, and I look at that future and I am scared. So I looked at the totality of our situation, and this scripture came to mind. It was the story of the lepers that came to mind, because I found it disturbingly analogous to the Nigerian situation, even though we sometimes do not seem to realize just how much our situation is analogous to that in that story. We are the lepers. Let me let that sink in. We are the lepers in that story. If you notice, I didn't say I am. I didn't say you are. I said we are the lepers. Nobody is born leprous. Leprosy is acquired after birth. I know you all tell yourself one very common lie. The commonest lie in Nigeria is your claim to citizenship. You tell yourselves that you are citizens, but it is a lie. It is only those who enjoy the immunity of impunity that are capable of enjoying Nigeria. If you do not have impunity, the capacity to live above the ambit of the law, you are a leper. Lepers were taken before the court in Abuja. Just, I think, a couple of days ago. Or was that yesterday? No, it was on Friday. They took lepers to a court in Abuja. And you know by law, if you go to the book of Leviticus, lepers are treated as being separate. Because if they were not separate, they should have equal access to justice. And I am sure that nobody should be required to tell a judge who is sworn to protect the weak that those are citizens, if they were citizens. Once upon a time, there was the delusion of citizenship in Nigeria. And that was before the leprosy of immunity or impunity meant that those who should be above the law are within the city gates. They are out, they are inside the city limits. Inside, they are in the city. The lepers, they were at the gate. Those are the ones excluded by society. And if you thought that was all, I'll remind you that those who were killed at Lekki Toll Gate, they were also lepers. That is why the society has continued to pretend that they did not exist, in spite of a judicial pronouncement of a massacre. So, lepers. The theme of leprosy, I know it might sound shocking to you, but the reality is that what makes the Nigerian a leper is the fact that he is excluded. The only thing that includes everybody is the rule of law. When the law does not rule, when you have exceptions, those exceptions can only be explained by something. Okay. If we ask ourselves, exactly what is the effect of leprosy? One of the first things that you notice with leprosy is that the leper's digits begins to fall off. So his capacities becomes limited. He can't even, Yorubas have a proverb, they say, abere bolo adete, odete. It means that the needle fell off from the leprous finger. And now, he has no way of picking it up. So it becomes a quandary. That is the situation with the Nigerian. You go abroad, you are separated. They separate you at airports. Within Nigeria, the policeman looks at you like our dishonorable mascot. He looked at a boat driver. The average boat driver in Nigeria is a university graduate. 90% of the boat and Uber drivers in Nigeria, if not more, are university graduates or dropouts who could no longer afford to go to school because the system simply failed them. And then a person who says that he's a sworn representative. And you know the beauty of that situation? For a long time, lepers have had difficulties in identifying themselves in Nigeria. You have the lepers of Yoruba Ronu, who thinks is different from the lepers of Biafra. And then you have the lepers of Katsina, the Fulani peasant, who you will blame for all the woes of the South. So the lepers have had difficulties identifying themselves, and they have been busy fighting in the army of their enslavers. Now, mascot, who assaulted the boat driver, is Igbo. In the hierarchy of Nigerian impunity, the Igbo man is the lowest in that hierarchy, unfortunately so. But that is the reality. If that guy, mascot, if he was an Hausa or a Fulani man, we would not be united in condemnation of his evil. We would have been distracted by his ethnicity or religiosity, and we would have been debating that. If the king of Nigeria, who is sat within the city limit in Aso Rock, were to be a man from the Delta, when they brought the lepers to court in Abuja on Friday, Arewa would have gone crazy. But we have Mumu, Muslim. Nobody can preach about it, and everybody is suddenly silent. Let me say this. When we allow ourselves to ignore the fact that everything we hate, we also fear, then it becomes easy to recruit us into the armies of our oppressors to begin to fight on behalf of those who have enslaved all of us. I'll show you. A few months ago, a certain cross-dresser in this town was arrested for spraying money. There are numerous videos online where you find obas, politicians, governors, even presidents, ex-presidents spraying money. But of course, EFCC is not meant for the like of them. It is the lepers that the EFCC must find. And of course, who is more leprous than the one who does not look like you? So, we were all pressed into service in 18 Bobrisky to the point where we ignored that the law that was enforced against him is ignored in relation to others. Bobrisky, which is a paradox for Nigeria, the country we have all built, was now meant to go to jail. But of course, since the jail in Nigeria is meant for the poor and the weak, Bobrisky was able to assess the levels of injustice that is available to non-lepers. So he equalized with money. And then you begin this hypocritical belly aching that has run from the bowels of the disgraceful National Assembly, and they are having all kinds of circuses. And we are all entertained, and we ignore that if it was available to the person we don't like, in relation to which we are now bleating, it was available to the murderers who could afford it. It was available to the armed robbers who could afford it. It was available to the kidnapper who could afford it. It was available to each and every one of the persons who could either afford it or who are members of the non-leprous class, whom the class is punishing and are sent to Kirikiri or other correctional or in-correctional centers. The important thing that we all need to understand in this case is that there is a commonality to this affliction that we forget when we convince ourselves to embrace the hatred by which we have been divided. Who are the Syrians? At least, I think by around verse 5, they start telling us about how the Syrians' tents were there. So, who are the Syrians? The Syrians are your fears. The Syrians are the hatreds. All the things that you have used to divide yourselves, those are the Syrians. Everything that we desire as a collective, because I doubt that there is anything the Yoruba wants that the Igbo man does not want, or that the Ijaw man does not want, or that the Fulani man would dislike. We all want the same thing, but we are failing to see the commonalities. The Syrians represent our fears. Everything we desire is at the other side of our fears. Your fears also encapsulate your hatred. Like I said earlier on, it is impossible to love something and hate it. But you cannot ever fear anyone or thing without hating that thing. It is only God that you may fear. And I say this, myself and Daddy have had this discussion before. The proper word is not fear. You don't fear God. You reference him. Is referential awe. respect, deep respect for his capacities, because it comes from you knowing him. You know what he can do. So you respect, venerate him. You don't fear God. It is reference, not in the fear of you are trembling. Even if you tremble before God, it's out of reference, not out of fear of injury. So let us be clear that everything that we seek is at the other side of our fears, of our hatred. If you look at 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7, to be specific, that's 2 Timothy. It says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. You know, it is impossible for you to have the soundness of your mind and embrace hatred. It is impossible. It is simply impossible. If you have retained the soundness of your mind, the only thing that might happen to you when you are confronted with a phenomenon is curiosity. You are curious. That's why you see Oyibo, when they run into something strange, they want to capture that thing, they want to study it. You know what we will do? If we are not casting and binding, we are finding the kumo with which we will kill that thing, because we are fearful. We have embraced the spirit of fear. And that spirit of fear also predisposes us to hatred. So anything that does not look like us, we are afraid of it. And we cover our fear with the veneer of hatred, because it's easier to confess hatred than to confess ignorance. The average person that you are hating on, whether it's the Yoruba Ponu faction of our country, whether it's the Arewa supremacist, whether it's the Biafran must go, whoever you are in Nigeria, our problems are the same. Exactly the same. It is in now recognizing that these problems are the same that we can now form alliances that leads us out of where we are. If you've ever seen ants, thank you. When you see ants in floods, when there are floods, you'll find that ants build bridges. They knot themselves together, they join together to build bridges, and then others will climb on top of them, and they all cross. And I did a social experiment in my house. I asked my wife to witness it one day. You know, when you see column of ants, and I can be a very curious person in spite of my age, I'm still a child. So I picked up a lighter one day and I burnt them. I'm sorry to confess, may God forgive me. So, and then I came back later on and I discovered that I couldn't find a single one. I was curious. I told my wife. So I did it a second time. I'm very curious. And then this time around, I saw that it was the ants themselves that were coming back to pick their dead. If you don't believe me, try it on your own. But even more curiously, this morning, a friend sent me a scientific fact. Something said by Sir David Attenborough, and I want to share it with you so that I'll further explain this theme of finding common purpose. Sir David Attenborough said this. He said, biologists say that trees are social beings. They can count, learn, and remember. They nurse sick members, warn each other of danger by sending electrical signals across a fungal network. And for reasons unknown, keep the ancient stumps of long-felt companions alive for centuries by feeding them a sugar solution through their roots. I'll share this with Daddy. That's Sir David Attenborough, one of the foremost nature scientists in the world. Now, this is what when I read that piece, what scared me is the fact that trees that we would refer to as inanimate objects, they understand the need to synergize. They do not think or believe that they are alone. They understand the need for everybody to work together as a collective. I look at us, especially we Nigerians, and even more particularly our siblings, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers who live in the diaspora. I sometimes hear them complaining about the racism in the countries in which they reside. And I am amazed that they could simply not recognize that the racist is merely the superior cousin of the tribalist. If you cannot accommodate the Igbo in your space, or you could not accommodate the Yoruba in your space, or you think the Fulani man is your problem, how do you say anything about the racist? The racist at least has the excuse of skin pigmentation. What's your own? So, the biggest problem of the lepers would appear to be an inability to recognize themselves. Now, they didn't tell us that the lepers went in different direction. The scripture is clear. Although some scriptures, some Bible students will tell us that these were the children of Geas and his children. But it still does not explain the fact that they found the grace to act in concert. They moved as one. Two did not say, let's go into the city. They didn't remember this. In spite of the fact that they were lepers, they were not stopped from entering the city. They could have entered. So because you are carrying a Nigerian passport does not mean you are a Nigerian citizen. They could enter the city. They simply could not enjoy the privileges of others. So let's be clear, you can enter the city as Nigerian, you have your NIN, you even have BVN, you carry your passport. In fact, they asked you to go to your local government to get confirmation of your leprosy, and you did. Oh, sorry, your citizenship. And you did. So, the only problem is that the lepers are not recognizing themselves. And you know what makes the situation even worse for the lepers? You can't vote your way out of your leprosy. Okay, you don't believe me? Go and ask the people who pretended to vote in Edo, and they will tell you what their experiences were. So in case you forgot the lessons learned in February 2023, I remember I was here and I urged all of you to register to vote. We did all of that, remember? And you should get you remember now, we said it that, we did all of that. But of course, we didn't, even I was unaware of the fact of my leprosy. Hey. See, the fact of our situation is that everything that we desire is on the other side of our fear. That your fear and the hatred you sometimes harbor, they are twins. If you would instead focus on the fact that the things you desire for yourself is no different from what the next person desires for themselves, even though there might be slight variations, we can at least agree on a raft of things that are common to all of us. I am sure that when the mascot of impunity, I'm sure that part of his campaign, because I think he's an APGA representative, he even had one came picture next to him on his poster, our brother Ikemba, may God rest his soul. Ikemba was gracing his campaign poster. Ikemba was right there. But did he ask the ethnic affiliation of the boat driver? He did not. Our ethnicities do not matter to our oppressors. The fact of our leprosy only matters to us. They don't care. They are above it. You know, when you say you are above principalities and powers, they are above leprosy. We are the ones who need to get it into our heads that all the things that we are using to divide ourselves do not divide those who have divided us and who are the ones profiting from where we are. But I can tell you all about the fact that we are the lepers. I can tell you all about the fact that the Syrians are our fears. I could even make an effort and say to you that the king and those within the city are those who are enjoying the impunity that we have spoken about. But it does not bring the urgency of now into focus. After my friend passed on, a Yoruba song kept rising up in my spirit. And it wouldn't leave. So from time to time, I will sing it, and I will, don't worry, I'm not going to attempt to do anything like what your choir did. And it's most definitely not a Christian song, but it's a godly song. Because it does preach directly from the scriptures. It says, Ṣèyí tó ṣe ọ̀rẹ́ mi ọjọ́ ń lọ. Ṣèyí tó ṣe ọ̀rẹ́ mi ọjọ́ ń lọ, èyí tó bá ṣe là ó ròyìn. Ṣèyí tó ṣe ọ̀rẹ́ mi ọjọ́ ń lọ. I would interpret for you. He says, do what you will, for time is far gone. That's all he's saying. Ṣèyí tó ṣe ọjọ́ ń lọ. We can stay in our state of leprosy until we die. And then our children will inherit it. And you know the amazing thing about this sickness. Daddy even alluded to it when he was speaking earlier on. He said, truth dies in darkness. When a lie endures for so long and the sufferers become complicit in the erection and maintenance of that lie can actually become the truth in the consciousness of the victims. So each and every one of you, I'm speaking to you as my fellow lepers. I recognize the fact of my leprosy. I'm a Nigerian. That's why I'm always careful to explain that I'm not a citizen. I'm a victim of Nigeria. It is the grace of God that has kept one from the grave up till this point. 6 years ago, almost to the day, almost to the exact day, I was sent to prison by a court in this country for life, in the service of a church in this city. But the grace of God is what has kept me here, and I was freed. No, hold on, please. The point I'm trying to make to all of us is this. If we do not recognize the fact of the commonality of our victimhood, if you continue to think that those who voted Bulaba deserve their punishment and you don't want anything to do with them, you can't even bring yourself to show mercy to them as Christians, how do you bring yourself together to fight the evil? Okay, so you know the truth, but they are so ignorant because they have embraced hatred that they do not know the truth. How have you, as Christians, shown them the truth? I know it's actually very annoying, especially if you live in this neighborhood. This is Okota. Yeah. A vast majority of my Oriental brothers and sisters live in this neighborhood. You have borne the brunt of the madness that has overtaken our country. And you will see more. As we are drawing closer, because for them, the election cycle has started. The election cycle has nothing to do with your votes. They don't care. They've written the result already. But having written the result, they need you to now begin to divide yourselves. You need to be told to ignore the pains in your bellies, the hunger. You must forget it. And for you to forget it, they must give you hatred to embrace. And I saw a piece in the paper, I think sometime this past week, and I know that they have started the race. You know what I saw? Ajeromi Felodun local government published a list of streets they were renaming. in Ajegunle. And I saw how they are attempting to whitewash history and pretend that there is a certain ethnic group do not exist in that neighborhood. And I laughed. But I also know that it will require the complicity of good men and women who elect to embrace hatred for that madness to endure. I have lived in the Lekki axis for at least about 22 years. I have been associated with that axis for over 30 years. I know the area well. The names on our streets, and I'm just using this to illustrate so that you understand the insidious nature of the evil that has overtaken our country. The names on the streets in the entirety of the Lekki Peninsula, I don't know about other parts of Lagos State, they came about in a specified manner. Lekki was a swamp, a vast swamp. It was only the express that had any solidity to it. And they were selling land. And my Oriental brothers and sisters came. They would buy land in swamps. And then they would build roads with rubbles. And then they would bring transformer. And then they would build a street gate. And other people will be encouraged by the reason of their presence to come and start building on their own plots. And then the way you name streets, you take an application to the traditional ruler that the street be named after you. The traditional ruler and his secretary will verify your contribution to the neighborhood you are asking to be named after you. Almost every name you see decorating any street in Lekki, particularly the entirety of the greater Lekki Peninsula, they were men who either built roads or bought transformers. They were the first, they were the pioneers. Those who are today turning around and making it seem as if these things came by accident and they were on hand in an attempt to turn brothers against brothers for reason of political validation, they require you to forget that you are commonly lepers. May God cure all of us of our leprosy. But it does not change the fact that Nigeria has inflicted leprosy on those who should be citizens. Our afflictions are common to us. What do? I believe that in the coming days, weeks, and months, we must, as a collective, begin to find common purpose and set out what it is that we believe should happen to us as a people. And then stand behind our demands. They have children sent to correctional centers and facilities across the country. Parents are sat mostly unconcerned. A lot do not even know that this is in any way connected to them. But the reality is that tomorrow is actually quite gloomy if you took a very good look at where we are today. There is a urgency of now. That urgency does not allow us to outsource the resolution of these problems to a future generation. There is nobody coming to save us. The Americans won't save us. Get that clear. They benefit from this. Neither will the British. They've even tried to do you 419 now. They have a Yoruba-sounding person heading the Conservatives. It's all a scam. They need to bring what they are losing in Europe. They need to bring it out of the Commonwealth. So everything that has happened to us, you will not hear any one of the beneficiaries speak on our behalf. Have you heard any condemnation from the European Union? Have you heard anything from Britain? Have you heard anything from America? A long time ago, we were busy naming streets after American diplomats, thinking that salvation was coming from abroad. Salvation is not coming from abroad. I also assure you that Daddy will lead you in prayers, but we also need to act. Without acting, prayers are, I'm sorry to say, useless. God will do what God will do. But men must do what men will do. And in our own case, if we stay here, we perish. It's not really just Bible speak. It's the reality. Our situation is dire. We need to find the commonality of our affliction and then find common ground and common purpose. I'm on a church pulpit, so I am careful not to offend certain sensibilities. But let me also say this. May the tribe of Pastor Ayedogbon increase. When the Church of Christ becomes complicit in the emasculation and oppression of the people of God, that becomes a very scary time in which to live. But the Church of God is not limited to this physical building. The Church of God, each and every one of you, what do you do in your private space? How have you communicated the need to act as one in your private space? Do you even understand the urgency of where we are in your private space? We can wait for prayers, we can fast and pray, but if we do not act, nothing will change. We are the ones who will save us, and we really don't have time again. And just like I'm saying we don't have time again, the timekeeper in front of me has also informed me that my time is up. But my time might be up. I will not leave without telling you this one more time. Eshe itema she, Ojon law, do what you have to do. It will not always be convenient. But if you are convinced it's the right thing to do, do it. May God bless you.